Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Saturday morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing great out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day and a great beginning to your new weekend out there so far. We have a lot to talk about in this morning's video, and the big topic is going to be a significant pattern change as we enter January. And listen, I think this is going to be a big topic, at least on my YouTube channel, for the foreseeable future. I think that we'll be talking about this clear through the rest of the year, all the way into January of 2025, which is going to be the big topic in this video. So what's changed since, say, yesterday morning's video? Well, I've kind of teased at it, in portions of my video throughout the last couple mornings about there being a favorable time period as we're getting into January. I haven't talked about it a lot, but it's always been there. Just been waiting for a little bit more confidence to emerge for at least myself for this time period. And not only has my confidence significantly increased, but the confidence from the experts of the National Weather Service, their confidence has significantly increased, obviously, also based off this map you're seeing. So we're going to break this down. We're going to nerd out with you guys, break down the pattern evolution. We'll speak on temperatures compared to average. And yes, we will speak on if we're seeing any kind of winter storms in the long range. But just remember, it is the long range for a reason. And we're just not at that stage of figuring out this pattern where we're breaking down a storm signal or storm system. But I will show you the long range model guidance as far as the GFS and the Euro, as far as any kind of storm system. We'll talk about the MJO, which I don't speak on much on this channel, but I think it's important to mention it when breaking down this upcoming pattern change. And then we'll talk about today's weather, and then we will speak on a period between now and about Christmas Day that could favor a white Christmas for certain areas of the country. So buckle up. I think things are about to be full steam ahead. I got personal high confidence in that. So we just got to see what's going to happen if we can reel one in, especially for my folks here in the Southeast that haven't really seen anything for a while. So if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put that in the comments below so I can do that. And it gives others an opportunity to do so too. So enough with all the jabbering, let's get rocking and rolling. So the first thing I'll show you is what the Climate Prediction Center issued yesterday. This threw everybody for a loop, and a good loop if you're a winter weather or cold weather fan. And like I said, we've been seeing this for some time now, right? But all of a sudden, the National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center issued their week 3 to 4 outlook, which runs from the 4th of January through the 17th of January. So this is on out ahead of us, well past Christmas and the new year. But look at this. In the blue, that's where you have a higher than not chance of temperatures being below normal between that period I just mentioned, the 4th and the 17th of January. Below normal temperatures, so below average temperatures. So in this darker shade of blue, that's a 60% chance of temperatures being below normal. This kind of lighter shade of blue, that's a 55% chance, and you get to this even lighter shade of blue, that's a 50% chance. And this favors the central in the southern tier of the country. Confidence drops off a little bit on below average temperatures as we get in the northeast, and even though it does show a shade of orange up here, I mean, even if it's slightly above average temperature wise in Maine, that's still cold enough, certainly to get winter weather up in this neck of the woods up here. So this is wild. And you might think, well, this isn't a big deal. I mean, I barely even know what I'm looking at, this, that, and the other. But listen, when the National Weather Service is this confident, this far out, this tells us that this has legs, in my opinion. So I don't just want to show you the temperature. I also want to show you precipitation too. There's no point in just ignoring one thing and just showing you the other. Precipitation, yes, it does favor below average precipitation in this pattern. But I want you to look down here around an average chance of one way or the other, below or above average precipitation. But there is a shade of green down here that shows a 50% chance of precipitation being above normal. You never know. You get a cold enough press of air all the way to the south, and all of a sudden you get a storm track that only favors the deep south and the southeast. We call that a southern slider. But let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But it does favor below average precipitation basically in the brown. Okay, but this could change. This could tweak. Let's focus on what we're the most confident in. That is temperatures being below average. Okay, so let's break this pattern down. Now, this is the portion of the video that might bore some people, kind of lull you to sleep a little bit, but this is where we're going to nerd out with you guys. If you don't want to watch this portion of the video, I don't blame you, but this is something to really pay attention to if you really want to understand the driving features of any kind of weather pattern out there, whether it's severe weather, winter weather, the tropics, whatever it may be. This is important to try to understand. Okay, so we're going to start this off by looking at the OOZ Euro Ensemble, the one that just ran overnight. Confidence levels between all the ensemble guidance is sky high in the long range, which you typically don't see in the long range. Start out Christmas Eve morning. What it looks like is a ridge is going to dominate most of North America. The ridging is in the warmer colors. So the oranges, the yellows, the reds on your screen, that is a ridge of high pressure. So this normally favors above average temperatures for the most part. Doesn't always mean that, but let's just leave it at that. Okay, we can have pieces of energy undercutting, but sometimes when you're directly under the highest pressure of this ridge, that's typically calmer conditions above average temperatures. The blue you're going to see on your screen, this is lower pressure. Higher pressure, lower pressure. So you see this blob of blue, even shades of green. That is lower pressure, typically brings storminess, a dip in the jet, and colder than average temperatures. On average, that's what both of these little features mean. I just wanted to break that down ahead of time. So let's get this in motion. What we're extremely confident in is we're going to have a ridge. This ridge is going to dominate the pattern basically from Christmas onward. So this is going to bring above average temperatures, especially for Canada. But as we're working our way into Christmas, we're already seeing changes in the Pacific. We got lower pressure over Alaska, which normally favors above average temperatures for most of the rest of North America, especially the lower 48. But you're already seeing storm systems kind of undercutting this ridge. See the splotches of blue. These are weaker storm systems, upper energy. And I want you to watch as we start to get this ridge right here kind of inching up towards Alaska. Still a pattern as we're getting into the 28th. And if you're wondering about the time period, here it is. And it also shows it right here. Okay, we're getting into the 28th of December. Still a pattern that favors above average temperatures for most of North America. And then we're starting to get to the 29th. Okay. Then we get to the 30th. And let's take it all the way to about the morning of the last morning of the year. The morning of the 31st. Okay, what is happening here? I'm going to draw on this a little bit. All right, let's just use black. Suddenly, you're getting a spiking of the ridge out west. We call this a positive PNA. Okay, ridge is building. This thing is building all the way up to Alaska. And even though you're still seeing a lot of red right here, this is still a ridge building all the way up here. And this is beginning to already dislodge cold air. Remember, a lot of people get these colors mixed up. Just because you see a lot of red up here in Canada, that doesn't mean the temperatures are in the 80s up in Canada or anything. The air is still cold. I mean, it's late December, early January up here. So it's still cold even though the temperatures are above average. So you're getting this ridge spiking up. You're getting kind of a backing of the Pacific jet. So this area in blue is starting to move away from us. Thank goodness, because this feature right here is what floods North America with a lot of warm air. So the Pacific jet is backing away. You're starting to get this blob of blue showing up here. I'm just going to do X's. I probably should do checks. Let's do a check here. Okay, you're starting to see this blob of blue showing up over the central portion of the country. All right, so let's get this all going again. Now watch what happens as we start to get into January 1st. All of a sudden, this is all the way until about the morning of January 3rd. I know we're 300 hours out, but listen, I'm going to show you here in a second as we progress through all ensemble guidance how their agreement between all long range ensemble guidance is pretty wild. You're getting this ridge spiking up towards Alaska and just western Canada. Positive PNA ridge. Once you get the ridging all the way up in Alaska, we call that a negative EPO. Okay, that's good too. We'll talk deeply on the acronyms a little bit more when we need to. Okay, so ridge is spiking all the way up in this region. Okay, this is dislodging cold air down here. This is dislodging cold air. You see this kind of medium blue line here? That is the jet starting to dip down. So you're getting cold air that's funneling into this big blob of blue right here over the central and eastern U.S. That is a storm track beginning to emerge with cold air coming down here. Now, I don't think this cold air is going to be super cold at first. I think it's going to take time for this colder air mass to really get going, because remember, North America, especially up in Canada, is really going to torch between Christmas and around New Year's, you might as well say. Well above average temperatures. You're probably going to nuke the snowpack up here, and it's really going to create negative impacts. But listen, this is going to continue to progress. So cold air is coming down here and going into this lower pressure, which could be maybe an active pattern, but in general, a trough is starting to develop into the eastern U.S. And we keep this going, and watch how this blue really expands across the eastern and central U.S. And by the time we get into the morning of January 4th, which we don't know if this is exactly going to be the trough orientation over the eastern U.S., you have a favorable look for storminess and colder weather across the eastern half of basically North America, especially the lower 48. We still got this ridge spiking up here, cold air coming down here, and we're getting deeper shades of blue, lower pressure, colder air down into here, maybe an active storm track. And this look right here screams energy. And remember, I keep drawing these lines down here, but when this ridge spikes up like this, and the jet is basically getting pushed all the way up here, okay? The jet is dipping down here too. So we're getting areas of energy diving down here with cold air coming down here too. So areas of energy is kind of riding down the eastern side of this ridge. It's spiking up here. And as these little areas of energy that I did X's by comes down here, taps into this cold air, all of a sudden we could have energy, precipitation, linked up with cold air, and we're going to end up getting winter weather across the eastern half. That does include also the central portion of the U.S., but the eastern half of the lower 48. Ridging all the way up to Alaska, western Canada, dislodges cold air, pieces of energy riding, okay, the eastern side of this ridge, going into the cold air, and voila, we have a favorable pattern for winter weather right into this area. Obviously not to the Gulf of Mexico, but you get what I'm saying. Okay, I really think that this pattern initially could probably favor the Midwest and the Ohio Valley, this area. But I think as this pattern progresses, I think that it could favor areas further south. I mean, maybe like this. I really do. So we just got to see what's going to happen here. And we'll kind of keep this all the way to the end of the run, and it continues to look good. And right here at the end, you see this extension of the blue? Watch this. See how it extends west? That tells me the energy is going to have an opportunity to dive further to the west, which is going to allow it to dig more. And this is going to make the winter weather chances even better, tapping in with that cold air. It's just going to be a classic look for an eastern U.S. storm system. Okay? Now, we're going to be breaking this down a lot over the coming days, and I'll probably get better at explaining it. But listen, if we're looking at the GFS ensemble, it looks a little bit different, but in general, it's the same. So we progress this forward. We get past Christmas, ridging. There it is, dominating North America, the lower 48. And it on the GFS ensemble, it wants to dump a trough out west first, and then it kind of detaches itself, if you will, ridging, lasting all the way into the 30th, okay? And then here's the lower pressure showing up over the southeast. Now we got this weird feature that could disrupt the spiking of a ridge, but I think that'll disappear. And then look what you get here. Now already on the GFS ensemble for New Year's Eve, we're already getting lower pressure over the middle of the country and the southeastern portion of the country. Okay, already getting spiking of the ridge, kind of a broad ridge. We really need this to be taller and just shooting upward a little bit better. But this is dislodging cold air already down into here. And we're already getting lower pressure, which means we could already be having some storm systems down here potentially. Okay, so dislodging that cold air. Now, the GFS ensemble really progresses this a lot faster. But then you keep this going. What's wild to me is as we're getting into New Year's Day, this would favor cold air across the entire lower 48. It looks a little bit different, right? The Euro ensemble more so favors the eastern half of the country. The GFS ensemble favors the entire lower 48, just with cold air dumping down. And I know this is probably confusing. You're probably looking at this, man. How is this cold air? It looks orange. Well, this is still cold air up here. Remember, this is the 500 millibar pattern. This doesn't tell us temperatures really in any levels of the atmosphere. This doesn't even speak on temperatures. Okay, this is the 500 millibar pattern. It really shows ridging and troughing. Troughing, lower pressure, ridging, higher pressure. Okay, this is still dislodging cold air down into here. Okay, lower pressure all across the lower 48, which tells us, yeah. And then you keep this going. We go into the 4th of January, and holy smokes, I mean, this would favor just a dump of cold air all across the lower 48. Look at just the shades of blue everywhere. Lower pressure, colder air, storminess. This would be wild. I mean, this is a wholesale trough across the entire lower 48. Like I said, it would just favor a winter storm track across really the central U.S., the eastern U.S., and this even brings troughing into the southwestern U.S. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but if you kind of compare that with this, I mean, and it's the same thing. You get a dislodgement of cold air down to the lower 48. And then you look at the Canadian ensemble, and we'll speed through this a little bit faster. And it's the same thing, folks. I mean, we get, this favors more of the Euro ensemble, but we get that lower pressure over the central and eastern U.S., and we get the dislodgement of cold air down into this lower pressure, and we're probably going to favor some sort of winter weather event and the potential for an active storm track, but certainly a higher potential for colder than average temperatures, as we could tap into more so a cross-polar flow, especially on the Canadian ensemble. It really gets that cross-polar flow going, where you have lower heights all the way up into the Arctic. Spiking of this ridge, just a cross-polar flow. This would really favor the potential for a southern winter weather event. So I know I spent a lot of time on that, but I think it's important to do so. And we'll get better at explaining it as time goes by. But you saw all those blue colors on your screen, right? What does this mean with temperatures? Well, we know that it's going to be above average across most of the country between now and about New Year's Eve. But as we're starting to get into January 1st, you're starting to kind of beat down these above average temperatures across the central U.S. and steadily beat across the south. And by the time we're into the 2nd of January on the Euro ensemble, you're starting to get below average temperatures across the southern tier of the country. And then as we're getting into the 2nd and the 3rd, the chances are increasing for below average temperatures. The blue, just think of that, like I said, is below average temperatures. Don't focus too much on how far below average it is. What we look for here is just the blues, okay? We're starting to get the below average temperatures creeping in as we're getting into the first couple days of January. And this does nothing but get more below average as we progress through the first several days of January. And then where we do see the greens, guys, I mean, that's 10 to 15 degrees below average in early January. That's pretty cold. And that's another thing that I haven't spoke on over the last 20 minutes is this pattern change is going to happen during prime climo, meaning this is going to happen during one of the coldest times of the year, which is January for most people. And you keep this going, and you can't ask for a better opportunity if you want a winter storm for my people in the Southeast, and really anywhere across the South, and really anywhere. And I'm not just speaking about the Southeast. And you look at the GFS ensemble. Now watch this. We start off about 10 days from now, below average temperature for most of the lower 48 in Canada. And then look, as we progress to the first couple days of January, into the first several days, below average temperatures not only impact the South, but it impacts most of the country. I mean, most of the country gets below average, and that makes sense because if you stop it here, right, and then you go back and you look at this, you see how I had just wholesale troughing across the entire lower 48. It makes sense that the GFS ensemble temperatures are below average across the entire lower 48 also. So this pattern looks pretty solid, guys. Now, a lot of people are wondering, obviously, this is what most people want to see. Are we seeing any winter weather out there that's coming up? Well, we're still at the stage where we're still trying to actually get a favorable pattern in place. But are there any fantasy runs out there in that time period as we get closer to it? Well, we'll start off, a couple days after Christmas. We're going to get a lot of cutters. All right, we already know that with a above average pattern as far as temperatures. We're going to get rain all the way up into Canada. I mean, it's just going to be well above average. As we start to get closer to the new year, 30th, 31st, we start to get some dislodgement of cold air. You can already see the blue line starting to dive down. It's a big rainstorm, the eastern half of the country. But here it comes. The evening of the 31st, low pressure digs down here, some cold air dropping down. I don't think that's the cold air we watched for yet. Here comes the storm system January 1st. That's still too far out to know if that's actually going to happen. But what we look for is, look at these colder temperatures. Look at this 540 line digging all the way down into the deep south. And then we start to get even deeper into the run. And that, look at this 1055 high pressure, cold high dropping down. And when you see a zonal 540 line like this from Texas all the way to the eastern U.S., you know some big-time cold air is dropping down. And you keep going all the way to the morning of January 4th, way too far out to get excited about any kind of run. But you can see what inevitably happens. You get a winter storm cranking up across Texas, Arkansas, and the run obviously stops at day 15. This takes us all the way to the evening of January 5th. But listen, the pattern supports some wild times ahead as we get, really, I would say, into the second and third week of January. So that's what we're seeing here. Now, what about the European model run? A lot of cutters. We get into the 31st. Here comes a first batch of cold air diving down all the way. January 1st, big cold front diving down. GFS and the Euro shows this, different location. Could be a storm system associated with it. And then we start to get into January 2nd, cold air diving all the way down to the eastern U.S., the deep south. And this is really, really cold air. The 3rd, a lot of cold air diving down, but we're not seeing any storm. But listen, it's so far out. We're going to get a lot of flopping back and forth with that. Okay, but if you do and then this might throw some people off a little bit too, but if you continue to break down precipitation and we start on the morning of the 31st, okay, focus on that 540 line. That's where we know there's some cold air diving down. And if we continue to get this coming, we get into the 1st, we get into the 2nd, 540 line all the way down here into the deep south, the southeast, into South Carolina. And you see these shades of gray. This is the Euro Ensemble run, so it kind of combines all the storm systems from all 50 or so runs and kind of just creates a mean average of precipitation on your screen. So you can already tell there's some members showing a little bit of precipitation because there's some grays showing up down there. And what really gets me excited for somebody in the south is as we're getting a few days into January, like this is the 4th, for example, 540 line diving all the way down here into the deep south. It means we have cold air coming down, at least in the upper levels of the atmosphere. And then we're starting to see light precipitation down here. This is very far out, but this tells us that, hey, cold air dropping down, energy is there. It could potentially be there, I should say. Now, another cool thing to look at is, and this thing is sometimes everywhere, is the GFS ensemble. And on Weather Belt, it kind of creates a precipitation map of all the members that make up the ensemble run. And I like this because it just shows snow, it shows ice, and it shows rain, and it kind of gives us a good idea of the pattern coming up. Now, the further this goes along out in time, the more it kind of gets really splotchy and weird. And that's because some members are showing big winter storms, some are just showing nothing or rain in that time period. And you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. We'll start a week out. You can see just a lot of green over the central and eastern U.S. And that's exactly what's going to happen. A lot of cutters, a lot of warm air getting pushed very far north because of the ridge that we just broke down. But as we're starting to get closer to the last day of the year, we're starting to get a lot of blue showing up over the northern section of the country. And then we're starting to get into the first couple days of January, and we're starting to get some blue further south. Okay, and then check it out. I like the idea of this, of a winter storm over the middle of the country the first few days of January. We'll see what happens though. And then we keep going. All right, some of that snow's creeping further south now. This is not a forecast, just an ensemble run. And we'll go all the way out to, the last frame here, and we're starting to just get some members that do show some winter weather pretty far south. So we'll continue to watch this, guys, and we won't spend quite as long on breaking down the ensemble guidance each time. We'll probably stick with one ensemble run, but kind of just wanting to spend some time breaking down all the ensemble runs to kind of speak on my confidence level of this materializing. Now let's talk about the MJO. I don't speak on this much, okay? But what I can tell you, if you're a cold weather fan or a winter weather fan, you want your MJO to be in phase 8, 1, and even 2. 7's not that bad for certain areas. This is 8, this is 1, this is 2. So what you see here is we're in the 21st. Our MJO phase right now is 6, which really is not good for winter weather for anybody across the country. Sometimes you'll get lucky, like you just did with the winter weather event across the Northeast, but that wasn't a blockbuster event. Okay, what you'll see here is this line. This is the forecast for all these forecast models. Okay, it progresses into phase 7, and then it progresses into phase 8 as we start to get into the new year. Some of it progresses faster, like this one. By the time you're in the 3rd of January right here, you're starting to get into the phase 8. Now you look at the Euro forecast with this gets into the phase 8 right as we get into the new year. Favorable phase for winter weather across the eastern U.S. especially phase 1. Same thing with this, okay, getting into phase 8. And then the extended forecast really progresses this into phase 8 and then phase 1 and gets in kind of in a null stage. This does too. All right, see this purple line, that's January. Then we go down here. A little bit slower on this one, the Canadian forecast, but it looks like it's heading towards phase 8. And, we look down here, the Australian one, but we don't look at this much. And it does progress this through phase 8, 1, and 2. Now, some people are worried about is this is just going to run through the favorable phases too fast. And by the time we're in the mid to late January, we're back into phase 3 and 4, which isn't as favorable. But we'll watch this and we'll continue to try to figure this one out. Today's forecast, 27 minutes in. This is what's going on right now. Some lake effect snows. We got some snow flying around New York City, Long Island, southern New England. Let me know how much snow you've seen in New York City. We did have an overachiever in Buffalo, like we kind of thought we were. Several inches of snow fell in certain areas. We're getting snow up here in New Brunswick, a little bit of snow in the down east areas of Maine. The middle of the country is pretty chill. Not a lot going on. In the western U.S., we do have a system moving in. As far as the threat of any thunderstorms, you just got to watch out for the coastal areas of California and Oregon. Excessive rainfall outlook, there's no threat of it, so I don't even have it pulled up. The southeast today, besides some snow showers drifting across the Appalachian Mountains, it's pretty nice. It's a pretty nice day. It's going to be a cold day, but it's a nice day. If you got any last second plans for Christmas or whatever you got going on, you're like me, just chilling around the house today, I'm very excited about that. At the end of the day, it's going to be a pretty nice day. The Northeast, we could have just snow showers, snow flurries drifting around. The last little bit of snow will drift off Long Island later this afternoon. We're just going to get some snow showers across Ohio, West Virginia, PA. Some ocean effect snow could impact areas of eastern Mass as we're starting to get later into this weekend. We'll see what happens with that. That was the big surprise in eastern Mass yesterday, was the ocean effect snow. That was wild stuff. It's always wild when that happens. But as you continue to move forward here, look how the orientation of this band starts to get close to Cape Cod. Maybe some ocean effect snow tomorrow. We'll see what happens. But today, a pretty quiet weather day. The south central U.S., it's been quiet for a while. It'll continue to be quiet today. There's nothing to speak on, not a drop or flake of anything. And then the north central U.S., north to south, lake effect snow band and Lake Michigan. So this could bring a little bit of light snow into northern Indiana, extreme southwest lower Michigan, a little bit of lake effect flurry snow activity for the southern shoreline of Lake Superior. And we can get a little bit of lake effect snow from Cleveland points east in Ohio. Outside of that, guys, quiet day. We could wake up to some festive flakes flying around in Wisconsin, though, tomorrow morning. The western U.S., most is pretty quiet, but we do have another weather maker that's going to move into Northern California, Oregon, and Washington State. higher elevation snow. You got to get way up there, not a very big snowmaker for lower elevations. But mostly rain for the for everybody else. This will move into the northern Rockies, higher elevation snow, lower elevation rain, and then the leftovers of this energy will begin to move into the north central U.S. Well, where it will bring the opportunity for a storm system across the north central U.S., the Great Lakes region, even the Northeast in the coming days. But temperatures locked into the freezer in the Northeast, extremely cold temperatures. Same thing with the Great Lakes region, the northern tier of the country, even a chilly day all the way across the Southeast, Deep South, areas in northern Alabama, northern Mississippi, areas of Arkansas might not even get out the 30s, a cold day, and then the western U.S. still above average temperature-wise. Now, I will speak on this a little bit leading up to Christmas. We'll start this off tomorrow morning. Not a whole lot going on, but as we're starting to get into Monday morning, Christmas Eve, if you will, some light to moderate snow does break out across Minneapolis, potentially again for Monday morning. Light moderate snow across Wisconsin, the Great Lakes region. This could increase in coverage as we get during the day Monday. That darker shade of blue is heavier snow. This could dump several inches of snow. Certainly a nice coating of snow right before Christmas. Sounds great, but for some, it's not that great. But snow falling pretty heavily up in the UP and Michigan, depending on where you live. Look at lower Michigan getting the snow. It's going to be cold enough for snow down in Detroit. It's possible, but definitely northern lower Michigan, a festive day, Monday is likely. And this will continue to move into the Northeast. And we'll move to the Northeast on the 23rd. Quiet start, maybe some ocean effect snow for areas of extreme southeastern Mass. And then we start to get into the morning of Christmas Eve. And look at this snow event moving in, especially for the interior New England area. We got heavy snow falling across New York, northern Vermont, New Hampshire, western Maine. And yes, this could bring a wintry mix all the way down into New York City. The northern half of New Jersey, maybe all the way down to Philadelphia, could bring snow to New York City. Like I mentioned, southern New England. We'll have to see what happens. And listen, this is Christmas Eve afternoon. Has a little bit of snow flying around in Buffalo. That would be neat. But by the time we're getting into Christmas morning, looks pretty chill. Snowfall forecast between now and the entirety of this event. Several inches of snow up in the UP and Michigan and northern lower Michigan. And maybe a little bit of snow for the southern half of lower Michigan. And we have to look at the blend of all models because the National Weather Service doesn't go all the way out through this time frame. But I mean, the blend of all models going for a couple inches of snow for Boston. I think maybe some of that is ocean effect snow. We'll see what happens. Going for a few inches of snow just across all of New England. And we'll see how this happens and how this works out for you guys. But we'll continue to fine tune this as we go. God bless all y'all. Thank y'all for being patient with me through this video. We'll continue to figure out this pattern going into January. Definitely some interesting times ahead. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful day. And who knows, I might see you this evening. God bless.